There comes a moment in life when the noise fades, the lights dim, and you find yourself standing between what was and what could be. It's that quiet, unnerving space where everything familiar begins to tremble, not to destroy you, but to awaken you. This is the threshold where God begins to move in ways you don't yet understand. And the truth is, when He's opening a new door, it rarely feels divine at first. It feels like loss, confusion, disorientation. The routines that once gave you comfort begin to feel too small. The prayers that once brought peace suddenly echo in silence. You start to wonder if you've taken a wrong turn, when in reality, heaven is rearranging your entire map. What most people call disruption is often divine intervention in disguise. God shakes foundations not to punish, but to prepare. He dismantles what you built with your own strength to make room for what can only be sustained by His. That's why the season before a new beginning always feels like something inside you is breaking apart, because it is. The shell that once protected your old identity can't contain who you're becoming. You're not being undone, you're being rewritten. Modern neuroscience helps us understand why these moments feel so intense. The human brain resists change because it interprets uncertainty as danger. Yet spiritually, uncertainty is the evidence that God is near, shifting you from logic to trust, from control to surrender. Every new neural pathway begins with discomfort, and so does every new chapter in faith. What feels like chaos to your mind is creation in progress for your soul. You see, God doesn't open new doors until He's closed the ones that distract you from purpose. But here's the catch. The closing doesn't come with a warning. It happens suddenly, like a storm clearing the air. You lose the job that defined you, the relationship you thought was forever, the certainty you used to wake up with. And in that void, you feel exposed, maybe even abandoned. Yet this is the sacred moment when heaven whispers, "You were never meant to stay there." So if you feel like everything stable in your life is shaking, it might not be the end, it might be the beginning. When God opens a new door, He doesn't invite you to escape life. He invites you to expand within it. Every ending carries the DNA of a new creation. You're not falling apart. You're being redirected. You're not losing control. You're gaining clarity. And the pain you feel right now is not punishment. It's preparation for purpose. This is where faith becomes more than belief, it becomes movement. The kind of faith that doesn't demand explanation but walks forward even when the path disappears. Because behind that uncertainty lies something sacred, a door that only opens when your spirit is ready to walk through it. Now that your heart is awake to this truth, we can begin the journey together. Let's step into the first sign, the moment when disruption stops being chaos and starts becoming calling, the sacred disruption. When God begins to open a new door in your life, the first sign isn't comfort or excitement, it's disruption. Something inside starts to shake. The rhythm that once carried you forward no longer feels natural. What used to make sense suddenly feels forced. You wake up one day realizing that what once felt like home now feels like confinement. That's because God doesn't start His greatest works in moments of ease. He begins them in moments of divine interruption. Every transformation begins by breaking the pattern that kept you safe but small. The sacred disruption is the unraveling of everything built on your own strength, so that your life can be rebuilt on His direction. The human mind fears this kind of change because it misinterprets it as danger. The amygdala, the brain's internal alarm, flares up the moment you step beyond the predictable. Andrew Huberman's research shows how uncertainty triggers stress hormones, not because something is wrong, but because your brain is searching for a pattern it no longer recognizes. Spiritually, this is the exact moment when faith begins to mature. God allows disruption not to destroy your stability, but to detach you from illusions of control. What feels like collapse is often divine construction beneath the surface. The discomfort you feel is evidence that your spirit has outgrown the environment it's been living in. Think about every major turning point in your life. It never arrived gently. It came through interruption. You didn't plan the conversation that changed your path. You didn't schedule the heartbreak that opened your eyes. You didn't expect the delay that forced you to face yourself. Yet in every one of those moments, something sacred was happening. The old version of you was being called to step aside so a truer version could emerge. Like a seed that must break before it can bloom, you're being stretched so your potential can finally breathe. Judith Beck often says that lasting transformation happens when thoughts, emotions, and actions align with truth. The same principle applies spiritually. God disrupts false alignments, the patterns that keep you attached to approval, comfort, or control. He disturbs your peace when it's built on things that were never meant to last. Sometimes that means removing people who no longer walk at your pace. Sometimes it means closing opportunities that once seemed perfect, but would have trapped your growth. It can even mean losing a version of yourself you once loved. That loss feels unbearable because your mind can't yet comprehend the purpose hidden within it. But heaven knows that new doors require new identities. This season of disruption is sacred because it's honest. It confronts what you've been avoiding. It brings buried emotions to the surface so they can finally heal. It dismantles your illusions about how life should unfold and invites you into the deeper question, how is God trying to shape me through this? The discomfort is not a mistake. It's a mirror reflecting the parts of you that still cling to control. Once you stop fighting the shift, peace begins to return. That peace is not the absence of pain. It's the awareness that your pain now carries meaning. From a neuroscientific perspective, this process rewires your brain. New connections form only when old pathways weaken. The same happens spiritually. Every time you choose surrender over panic, you strengthen the connection between your faith and your future. God is not punishing you. He's preparing you for a higher frequency of purpose. Disruption is His language of direction. He shakes what's temporary so you can stand on what's eternal. Imagine a sculptor working on a piece of marble. Each strike of the hammer seems violent to the stone, yet to the artist it's precise and necessary. That's how divine disruption works. Each blow removes what hides your true design. You may not understand every hit, but heaven never wastes a chisel. Every fracture exposes something more beautiful beneath the surface. The pain is purposeful because it's shaping the image of something greater within you. So when everything around you feels unstable, don't rush to escape it. Breathe. Watch. Listen. The sacred disruption isn't a curse. It's the announcement of a new beginning. God is not taking something from you. He's making space for what's next. The shaking you feel is not the end of your story. It's the moment heaven begins to rewrite it. When the familiar turns silent. There comes a point in every spiritual journey when the familiar begins to lose its voice. The prayers that once ignited your heart now feel mechanical. The places that once felt sacred now echo with emptiness. The conversations that once filled you with belonging now feel strangely distant. It's not that God has abandoned you, it's that He's changing the language of how He speaks to you. When the familiar turns silent, it's heaven's way of shifting your attention from what is safe to what is sacred. God removes the emotional noise so you can learn to hear Him in stillness. What once served your growth has now completed its purpose, and the silence is His gentle way of saying, it's time to move. Spiritually, this silence is the most misunderstood stage of divine transition. We associate God's presence with stimulation, signs, words, feelings, results, but faith isn't built in sound, it's built in silence. Neuroscience supports this. The brain processes quiet as a cue for heightened awareness. When external stimuli decrease, the prefrontal cortex becomes more active, sharpening introspection and emotional regulation. In other words, silence isn't absence, it's recalibration. God uses silence to awaken perception, not to punish you with distance. When the familiar stops responding, it means heaven has changed the channel. Think about it. Every great transformation in Scripture and in life began in silence. Moses in the desert, Elijah in the cave, Jesus in the wilderness. Each of them reached a point where their old ways of connecting with God no longer worked. The wilderness wasn't rejection, it was refinement. The familiar had to die so revelation could live. The same thing is happening to you. When your prayers feel unanswered, it doesn't mean heaven is ignoring you. It means heaven is teaching you to listen differently. God isn't speaking less, He's speaking deeper. Psychologically, this phase also mirrors what cognitive behavioral therapy describes as a shift in reinforcement. When a behavior that once produced reward suddenly stops working, the brain becomes frustrated, then curious, then adaptive. It begins searching for a new pattern of meaning. Spiritually, this is when your faith evolves from dependency to maturity. God no longer rewards repetition, He rewards revelation. He's teaching you to seek His essence, not just His evidence. That silence you feel is not empty space. It's an invitation into intimacy without proof. And yet, silence hurts. The familiar provided certainty, identity, routine. When it fades, you feel unanchored. But this is how God matures your trust, by detaching you from the comfort of what you can predict. In silence, you discover that peace doesn't come from outcomes. It comes from alignment. Your prayers begin to change. Instead of asking for answers, you start asking for awareness. Instead of demanding a sign, you begin noticing His presence in the subtleties, the timing of a conversation, the shift of a thought, the calm that visits your heart for no reason at all. That's where God hides His voice, in the quiet spaces between what used to work and what's about to be revealed. Philosophically, Descartes would describe this stage as the dismantling of false certainties, the beginning of true knowledge. To find truth, you must first doubt what you thought you knew. Spiritually, it's the same. God allows silence so you can unlearn the noise of your own expectations. The mind that once sought control must now surrender to mystery. Only then does the soul become capable of perceiving divine logic. Silence strips away illusion until what remains is essence. Faith without performance, love without transaction, obedience without applause. If you're in this place right now, where everything familiar feels hollow, don't mistake it for spiritual decay. It's divine redirection. The silence isn't proof that God has left. It's proof that He trusts you to walk without constant reassurance. When a teacher stops giving answers, it's because the student has reached a level where understanding must come from within. That's exactly what God is doing. He's no longer feeding your faith from the outside. He's activating it from the inside. So don't run from the quiet. Let it refine you. Let it deepen your discernment. Learn to sit in the silence without demanding noise, and you'll begin to sense movement beneath the stillness. Because when the familiar turns silent, heaven is preparing to speak in a new dimension, not through sound, but through revelation. The pull toward the unknown. There comes a moment when everything inside you begins to lean forward towards something you can't name. It's not ambition, not anxiety, not restlessness. It's a divine magnetism pulling you toward what your mind can't yet define. You feel it like gravity in your chest. You sense it when you wake up, and the world feels slightly too small. That's the pull toward the unknown. It's not confusion. It's calling. God awakens something within you that recognizes a destination your logic can't locate. You begin to feel drawn to new places, new ideas, new possibilities, and though you can't explain why, you know you can't stay where you are. This pull is heaven's language for transition. It's the spiritual equivalent of the brain's instinct for growth. Andrew Huberman often describes how novelty activates the dopamine system, awakening motivation and curiosity. But in the spiritual dimension, this isn't just neurochemistry, it's destiny chemistry. God places within you a signal that activates when your current environment no longer matches your potential. The restlessness you feel is not impatience, it's divine synchronization. You're being pulled by what you were designed to become. The familiar begins to lose its grip, not because you've failed, but because you've completed the assignment of that season. There's a paradox in this moment. Your spirit feels a sense of movement, while your circumstances appear motionless. That tension is the test of trust. You can't yet see the new door, but your soul can sense its outline. You start noticing coincidences that feel too precise to be random, words that echo what you've been thinking, moments that seem arranged by invisible hands. This is not fantasy, it's spiritual sensitivity heightening. God awakens perception before manifestation, so you'll recognize the new door when it appears. Faith begins where logic ends. The pull toward the unknown demands that you trade certainty for conviction. Most people resist this moment because the human brain is wired for predictability. Safety feels like control. But control is an illusion that kills growth. Descartes taught that doubt is the beginning of wisdom. Spiritually, that doubt is the bridge between comfort and calling. God doesn't require you to have the plan. He only asks that you respond to the pull. You don't have to understand where it's taking you. You only have to trust that the same hand that stirred your desire will guide your steps. Psychologically, this phase mirrors what cognitive behavioral therapy calls cognitive dissonance, when your inner values evolve faster than your external life. The discomfort of dissonance is a sign that transformation is underway. Spiritually, it's the sound of your future calling your present to rise. The same God who whispered purpose into your soul before you were born now begins to press that purpose to the surface. You start to crave things that align with peace, purpose, and authenticity, even if they make no logical sense. That's not rebellion, that's realignment. At first, you might try to ignore it. You tell yourself you're overthinking, that it's safer to stay. But divine pull never fades. It intensifies. The more you resist, the heavier stagnation becomes. That's how you know it's time. The places that once felt comfortable now feel tight. The friendships that once fit now feel foreign. Your environment hasn't changed. Your frequency has. The spirit within you has expanded beyond the walls you built to feel safe. That pressure isn't punishment. It's proof that you're evolving. God never reveals the entire journey because certainty would kill faith. He gives you only enough light for the next step, and that's all you need. Each act of obedience becomes illumination for the path ahead. Like neurons forming new pathways, every small step of faith builds a bridge toward the unseen. That's how heaven trains your intuition, one leap at a time. You learn to recognize divine rhythm not by control, but by surrender. So if you feel pulled toward something you can't describe, stop labeling it confusion. It's confirmation. God doesn't awaken desire without purpose. That holy restlessness is His way of saying, you've outgrown this level. You're not lost. You're being led. The unknown isn't a void to fear. It's a field to discover. Every great story of faith begins with a step into mystery. Abraham left without a map. Peter stepped onto water that defied logic. Every act of obedience created the miracle. You stand at that same edge now. The unknown is not your enemy, it's your invitation. The same God who called you out of the familiar will meet you in the unfamiliar. You may not know where you're going, but you can trust the one who's calling. Because the pull you feel isn't leading you away from security, it's guiding you toward destiny. The collision of resistance and revelation. The moment you decide to follow that inner pull toward what's next, resistance begins. It arrives quietly at first, hesitation, fear, the voice of reason whispering, what if this isn't God? What if you're wrong? Then it grows louder, disguising itself as logic, practicality, or even humility. But make no mistake, every divine transition brings a collision between resistance and revelation. The very fact that you feel opposition is proof that something sacred is being born. God doesn't reveal new paths without first allowing friction to strengthen your conviction. The tension you feel is not a sign that you're off track. It's the sign that you're stepping into alignment with purpose. Psychologically, resistance is your brain's defense mechanism against transformation. The mind seeks familiarity because familiarity equals safety. Whenever you try to change your life, your neural circuits react as if you're in danger, releasing cortisol and triggering fear responses that make you second-guess every decision. But here's where science and spirituality meet. Neuroplasticity only happens through friction. Without resistance, the brain doesn't rewire. Without challenge, faith doesn't mature. God uses pressure to reprogram your spirit, the same way experience reprograms your neurons. Revelation can't exist without resistance, because friction is the forge of clarity. You'll notice this pattern whenever you step into something new. Doors that should open easily will take effort. People who once supported you will question your direction, and your emotions will fluctuate between excitement and exhaustion. Yet this is the paradox of divine growth. The closer you get to breakthrough, the louder the resistance becomes. That's because your old identity is fighting for survival. It's not that your faith is weak. It's that your evolution threatens the patterns that kept you comfortable. The human brain fights to preserve energy, and change is energy intensive. Spiritually, it's the same. Transformation demands surrender, and surrender feels like death to the ego. This is the sacred collision, the battle between who you were and who you're becoming. Revelation calls you forward, resistance pulls you back. You stand between two realities, the memory of what's safe and the mystery of what's promised. That's where faith becomes warfare. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the obstacle becomes the way. Every resistance you face is not an enemy to destroy, but a teacher to understand. It exposes the fears that still own your decisions, the insecurities that still silence your voice, the doubts that still define your worth. God allows this inner friction so you can see what still holds your allegiance. Revelation requires refinement, and it's not only internal. The external world begins to mirror this tension. Opportunities appear, but so do distractions. People enter your life to confirm your calling, while others appear to challenge it. You begin to discern that resistance is not random, it's strategic. Every challenge that confronts your progress is a test of alignment. God uses opposition not to stop you, but to sharpen you. Without resistance, you would never develop the spiritual muscle to sustain what's coming. The door He's opening requires the strength you're building right now. Judith Beck's work in cognitive therapy explains that belief systems solidify through repeated experience. To change a belief, you must act differently while still feeling the fear that tells you not to. Spiritually, faith functions the same way. You act in obedience even when fear tells you to retreat. That act rewires both your mind and your spirit. The first few steps are always the hardest because they threaten the foundation of your old life. But once you step forward, momentum builds. Resistance loses its power the moment obedience takes the lead. In this collision, you're learning something crucial. Revelation doesn't eliminate fear. It transforms how you respond to it. Courage isn't the absence of anxiety. It's the decision to move while it's still present. The same God who revealed the promise will sustain you through the process. You're not meant to fight resistance by willpower alone. You overcome it through awareness. Recognize it, understand it, and move anyway. That's how revelation wins. If you feel torn right now, pulled in one direction by vision and in the other by fear, you are exactly where you need to be. The shaking you feel is the Spirit expanding your capacity. The battle is proof of purpose. Resistance means revelation has already been released. Don't retreat. Don't let fear translate the unknown into failure. The moment you confront resistance with faith, heaven begins to realign everything around your obedience. God never wastes struggle. He transforms it into strength. So when you find yourself standing between tension and truth, remember this. You were not created to stay safe. You were created to grow. And growth always begins with friction. What you're feeling right now is not the end of your peace. It's the beginning of your power, the rearranging of your circle. When God begins to open a new door in your life, He often starts by rearranging the people around you. Relationships that once felt essential begin to fade. Conversations that used to inspire now drain you. Some people stop understanding your language, not because you've become arrogant or distant, but because you've changed frequencies. You're not who you were when they met you. The pull that once united you now separates you. It's painful, but this is one of the clearest signs of divine transition. God reorganizes your circle to protect your destiny. He removes what no longer supports your next level, so you can grow without resistance. Spiritually, this pruning is not rejection, it's refinement. When the Spirit begins to elevate you, He disrupts relationships that were built on your old identity. It's not that those people are bad, they simply belong to a chapter that's closing. And like a tree shedding its leaves, you must release them so new growth can appear. Neuroscience mirrors this truth. The brain constantly prunes unused neural connections to strengthen the ones that matter. God does the same in your relationships. He cuts what no longer carries purpose so your focus can be fully devoted to what's coming. It's not loss, it's optimization. Still, it hurts. You might ask, why would God take them away? Why can't they come with me? Because every environment sustains a specific version of you. Some connections are seasonal, others are foundational. The mistake we often make is trying to drag yesterday's company into tomorrow's calling. But you can't walk into a new door carrying relationships built for an old one. The atmosphere of your next season requires people who speak the language of your future, not the dialect of your past. God is not punishing you by removing people. He's protecting your purpose by surrounding you with alignment. Psychologically, this is one of the hardest transitions a person can experience. Humans are wired for belonging. The limbic system associates social disconnection with physical pain. That's why losing friends or drifting from familiar circles feels like heartbreak. Yet what feels like loneliness is often sacred separation. God isolates before he elevates. He pulls you away from the noise so you can hear him clearly. The silence you experience when people drift away is the space heaven uses to shape your voice, deepen your conviction, and sharpen your discernment. Solitude is not punishment, it's preparation. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." The same applies to relationships. The soul becomes shaped by the company it keeps. If you surround yourself with fear, you'll shrink. If you walk with faith, you'll rise. God loves you too much to let the wrong voices distort your perception of his plan. That's why some doors remain closed until the circle changes. Not because you're unworthy, but because the environment around you can't sustain the weight of what he's building within you. You'll notice this shift through subtle signs. People who used to understand your vision now question your decisions. Some may even misinterpret your growth as pride or distance. But what's really happening is that God is detaching you from emotional dependencies that could sabotage your spiritual authority. The new door he's opening requires clarity, and clarity demands boundaries. Learning to let go gracefully is one of the most mature acts of faith. It means trusting that separation is strategy. Every person who leaves creates space for someone assigned to your future. Judith Beck's principles of cognitive restructuring remind us that change in environment reinforces change in identity. When you alter the people, places, and patterns that shaped your thinking, your mindset begins to evolve. Spiritually, God does the same. He rearranges your circle so your behavior and beliefs can align with your next level. You'll find new voices, mentors, friends, divine connections that don't compete with your growth but call it higher. And you'll recognize them instantly because they won't drain your spirit, they'll strengthen it. This process demands courage. You must accept that not everyone who started with you is meant to finish with you. Some were meant to plant seeds, others to water them, but only a few will walk with you into the harvest. God knows who belongs in each stage. Don't grieve those who couldn't stay. Thank him for what they gave and release them in peace. Every ending in relationships marks the beginning of alignment. When you surrender the people who no longer fit, you make room for those who will help you carry the promise. So if you feel lonely, misunderstood, or disconnected right now, don't see it as abandonment. See it as arrangement. Heaven is reorganizing your atmosphere for elevation. The pruning hurts, but the fruit will prove it was necessary. God is not taking away your community, he's upgrading it. The ones meant for your destiny will find you not when you chase them, but when you become who you were created to be. Hidden acceleration in delays. Every time you feel like your life has come to a standstill, when doors refuse to open and prayers seem to hang unanswered in the air, there's something far greater happening beneath the surface. What feels like delay is often divine acceleration in disguise. It's one of the deepest paradoxes of God's process. He moves fastest when it looks like nothing is moving at all. In this silence, he's not withholding progress, he's protecting purpose. He's refining the foundation before he builds the future. You're not being punished by time, you're being prepared by it. Patience isn't just a virtue in this stage, it's spiritual warfare. Every part of your being craves motion because the human brain equates movement with control. But from God's perspective, stillness is strategy. He slows your pace to synchronize you with his. The delay is not delay to him. It's divine pacing. When he pauses the visible, he's accelerating the invisible, rearranging relationships, healing unseen wounds, maturing your perception, and aligning circumstances that your eyes can't yet see. What you call waiting is heaven's choreography. Andrew Huberman explains that in moments of waiting, the brain enters a heightened state of neuroplastic readiness. It's preparing to adapt, learning to tolerate uncertainty so it can expand capacity for future challenges. Spiritually, that's exactly what God is doing in you. Every unanswered prayer strengthens your emotional regulation, rewires your reactions, and builds the endurance needed for responsibility. You're not stuck, you're stretching. Every moment of delay builds the inner architecture required to sustain what's coming. God knows premature blessings become burdens. That's why He withholds, until your character and your calling can carry the same weight. Think of it like the growth of a tree. The most critical development happens underground, where no one sees. Roots expand before branches rise. The deeper the roots, the stronger the fruit. When your life feels buried, it's not because you've been forgotten, it's because your foundation is being fortified. God's silence in these seasons isn't indifference, it's incubation. While you wait, heaven is aligning everything around you, setting the stage so that when the door finally opens, it won't close again. The Stoics understood this principle intuitively. Seneca wrote that time discovers truth. Every delay reveals what is real and what is temporary. What breaks you during waiting was never strong enough to walk with you through fulfillment. This is why God allows pauses. They filter motives, test desires, and expose impatience. Waiting is the laboratory of wisdom. It turns emotion into endurance, dreams into discipline, and faith into focus. You can't rush the construction of destiny because every shortcut weakens the structure. Judith Beck's cognitive frameworks show how reframing delay changes the brain's interpretation of suffering. When you see waiting as preparation instead of punishment, your stress response lowers and your creativity expands. Spiritually, the same shift happens. Perspective transforms pain into purpose. God doesn't want you to endure waiting passively. He wants you to engage it intentionally. The waiting room is not wasted time. It's sacred ground for transformation. Every unanswered prayer refines the way you hear. Every silence deepens the way you trust. And every pause strengthens the way you walk. It's easy to mistake God's quietness for His absence. But silence is the space where His precision operates. He's aligning things so specific that if He showed you now, you wouldn't believe it. The delay is His mercy, not His neglect. He's teaching you to walk by revelation, not reaction. The longer you wait, the more details He perfects. That's why when the door finally opens, everything falls into place effortlessly. Not because it was easy, but because it was exact. You'll know you're in this phase when nothing seems to move despite your effort. You pray, plan, push, and still nothing happens. But if you look deeper, you'll notice subtle confirmations. A growing calm within, a quiet confidence replacing frustration, an awareness that though nothing is happening externally, you're changing internally. That's the evidence of hidden acceleration. The external may look paused, but your inner world is expanding. God's silence is forming substance within you. Patience, resilience, wisdom, spiritual precision, qualities that can't be rushed. So if you find yourself waiting longer than expected, hold steady. Heaven's timeline doesn't operate by your clock. Every day that feels wasted is a brick in the foundation of what's eternal. You're not behind, you're being built. God is aligning events beyond your visibility, people beyond your proximity, and opportunities beyond your imagination. What looks like delay is divine momentum disguised in stillness. When the moment finally arrives, you'll see why it took time. Because acceleration without preparation always leads to collapse. You're not waiting for God to move. God is waiting for you to grow into what He already prepared. And when that growth reaches completion, what once felt like delay will reveal itself as perfect timing. What you thought was a pause was actually propulsion, heaven's way of pulling you back like an arrow before launching you farther than you've ever been. The unexpected provision. There will come a time when you reach the edge of your resources, when effort, logic, and planning no longer seem enough. You've prayed, you've prepared, and yet the outcome feels beyond your control. That's the threshold where divine provision begins to unfold. It never arrives how or when you expect. It doesn't come through the channels you've relied on, but through new ones you didn't even know existed. The pattern of heaven is always to surprise the human mind because what's predictable can't be called miraculous. The unexpected provision of God often enters your life disguised as inconvenience, interruption, or even loss. What feels like collapse is often the clearing that makes space for something greater. Spiritually, divine provision is not simply about receiving things, it's about alignment. God provides not to relieve your anxiety, but to confirm your direction. He doesn't bless confusion, He blesses clarity. The moment your heart aligns with His will, you begin to notice doors open without your effort. People appear at the exact moment you need them, opportunities surface that no strategy could have orchestrated, and resources find their way to you as though magnetically drawn. That's not coincidence, that's synchronization. God's provision is the echo of His promise. Neuroscience gives us a glimpse of why this feels so extraordinary. When you experience genuine trust, your brain shifts from a state of threat into one of openness. Cortisol levels drop, dopamine and oxytocin rise, and your perception expands. You begin to notice possibilities that anxiety once blinded you to. Faith literally changes your biology, tuning your nervous system to receive what was always there. That's how divine provision works, not as external magic, but as internal realignment. Once your inner frequency matches heaven's, you see what was previously invisible. You stop striving and start discerning. The Bible tells countless stories of this: manna falling from heaven, water flowing from rocks, ravens feeding prophets in the wilderness. The message is always the same: provision follows obedience, not certainty. When you move where God sends you, He takes responsibility for your sustenance. But when you try to secure your life through control, you block the flow of grace that was meant to sustain you. The unexpected provision arrives only when you step into dependence, that sacred space where faith becomes your supply chain. Often, you'll recognize it through small details, the right word at the right time, the opportunity that arrives the moment you thought it was over, the relationship that seems ordinary but carries destiny within it. That's how heaven moves, subtly, precisely, always on time. You don't chase it. It meets you on the path of obedience. Your only job is to keep walking even when the road looks empty. The miracle doesn't manifest until motion begins. Judith Beck's work reminds us that the brain's perspective determines its reality. When you reframe lack as an invitation instead of failure, creativity and awareness expand. Spiritually, God does the same with your faith. He waits for you to look beyond scarcity so you can perceive abundance. Every limitation you face is an opportunity for revelation, a chance to see that you're not your own provider. You are sustained by a source that transcends your strategy. That realization is what transforms anxiety into gratitude and fear into trust. There's something deeply humbling about this stage. You realize how small your control truly is and how vast God's orchestration always was. He arranges events with a precision your intellect could never reproduce. The business connection that changes your life, the stranger who gives you the exact confirmation you prayed for, the closed door that redirects you to something infinitely better. These are not random moments. They are coordinates in a divine pattern far too intricate for coincidence. And yet, God's provision isn't always material. Sometimes His greatest gift is endurance when you expected escape, strength instead of shortcuts, wisdom instead of wealth. You begin to see that provision isn't about what's given, but about who you become through the process of trusting. The unexpected provision of God doesn't just fill your hands, it forms your heart. You stop asking when will it come and start realizing it's already here. Philosophically, Aristotle taught that potential becomes actual through movement. Spiritually, provision becomes visible through faith in motion. When you walk, God multiplies steps into pathways. When you obey, He transforms scarcity into sufficiency. It's never about the size of your faith, but about the direction of it. The smallest step toward obedience activates heaven's supply line. So if you find yourself at the edge of your resources, mentally, emotionally, financially, don't panic. You are standing in the exact position where miracles manifest. The breaking point is the birthing point. The moment you surrender the need to control the outcome, you make space for the supernatural to intervene. Provision is not something you chase. It's something you attract when your heart is aligned with heaven. What's meant for you will not miss you. What God intends will arrive precisely when you're ready to handle it. trust that timing. Because when the provision finally appears, you'll realize it was never late. It was waiting for you to grow into the version of yourself that could recognize it. The renewal of desire. At some point in every divine journey, a quiet transformation begins within you. Not in your circumstances, but in your desires. The things you once chased begin to lose their color. The ambitions that used to drive you start to feel hollow. You find yourself craving peace more than recognition, purpose more than applause. This shift is not failure or fatigue. It's the renewal of desire. God begins to reshape what you want so that what you seek aligns with who you are becoming. It's one of the most mysterious and powerful signs that He's preparing you for a new door. Before He changes your environment, He changes your appetite. Spiritually, this renewal is a form of purification. God never elevates without refining motive. The human heart is prone to confuse calling with craving, purpose with performance. So He allows dissatisfaction to rise, not as punishment, but as correction. What you once desired was right for a previous version of you, but now it no longer fits. The same way the body outgrows certain foods or habits, the soul outgrows pursuits that no longer nourish its purpose. That's why even success can start to feel empty. When heaven begins to call you higher, your old rewards lose their flavor. Neuroscience helps us understand this shift through the lens of dopamine recalibration. Andrew Huberman explains that the brain's reward system can be reshaped by focus and intention. When you direct attention toward deeper meaning instead of shallow gratification, dopamine starts to reinforce growth, not indulgence. Spiritually, this is what happens when God renews your desires. He redirects your internal reward system. You start finding fulfillment not in achievement, but in alignment. What used to excite your flesh now exhausts your spirit because it no longer resonates with your divine frequency. This process can feel confusing at first. You may wake up questioning your drive, your goals, even your identity. Passions that once defined you begin to fade, and you wonder if you've lost motivation. But what's really happening is refinement. God isn't removing your passion, He's purifying it. He's separating purpose from ego, devotion from desire for control. The things that once validated your worth no longer do, because your worth is now rooted in something eternal. You're learning to want differently, not less. Judith Beck's principles of cognitive transformation explain that true behavioral change happens when your core beliefs shift. When your definition of success changes, your decisions follow naturally. Spiritually, this renewal of desire marks the moment when heaven rewrites your internal script. You begin to crave alignment over approval, contribution over comfort, authenticity over applause. You start walking away from situations that drain your peace, even if they look successful on the surface. This is not weakness, it's spiritual intelligence. It's the maturity of a soul that has finally learned to distinguish between what shines and what sustains. There's a certain grief that accompanies this change. Letting go of old dreams can feel like betrayal. You might question if you've lost faith in your purpose, but what's dying isn't your calling. It's the version of your calling that was filtered through fear and need for validation. God is stripping away what was rooted in performance so He can rebuild it on authenticity. Every fading desire is making space for something purer, deeper, and more aligned with eternity. Philosophically, Descartes taught that clarity of thought comes from doubting illusions. Spiritually, God uses this same principle by allowing your old desires to disappoint you, so you can see through their illusion of fulfillment. The pain of disillusionment becomes the seed of discernment. You begin to realize that peace is the highest pleasure and purpose is the deepest form of joy. Your focus turns inward, not in self-obsession, but in self-awareness. You start to recognize that divine desire is less about what you get and more about who you become. As your desires renew, your energy begins to redirect. You start investing in what truly matters, relationships that edify, work that carries meaning, silence that restores clarity. You no longer chase validation because your spirit has found value in obedience. What once looked like losing interest is actually gaining purpose. You begin to understand that God doesn't give you every desire you have. He gives you the desires that are safe for your destiny. He protects you by changing your heart before he changes your circumstances. This renewal is sacred because it prepares you for sustainability. Shallow desires burn fast and fade quickly. Divine desires endure because they're anchored in eternity. When you start wanting differently, you start living differently. You stop measuring success by outcomes and start measuring it by alignment. The new door God is opening requires a new heart posture, one that no longer craves what impresses people, but what pleases him. So if you find yourself uninterested in things that once thrilled you, don't fight it. Don't panic. You're not losing passion. You're gaining purpose. The Holy Spirit is upgrading your appetite for destiny. What you feel is not emptiness, it's expansion. God is replacing shallow desires with sacred ones, temporary goals with eternal ones. This is how he prepares you to recognize the next door, not by showing you more, but by teaching you to want less of what doesn't matter. The invitation to stillness. When God is about to open a new door, the first instruction is rarely to move faster. It's to be still. This is the stage where heaven slows everything around you until you have no choice but to face yourself. The noise begins to fade. Plans stall, distractions lose their grip, conversations quiet down. You may think life is falling silent, but it's actually becoming sacred. Stillness is not inactivity, it's alignment. It's the moment when God calls you out of motion so he can bring your heart back into rhythm with his. You don't need to chase what's next. You need to become still enough to hear what's already being spoken. Spiritually, stillness is one of the hardest disciplines because the human mind fears silence. It's wired to fill space with sound, activity, and thought to avoid confronting itself. Neuroscience reveals why. When external stimuli decrease, the brain's default mode network activates, amplifying self-reflection. This is why silence feels uncomfortable at first. Your mind begins to echo with everything you've avoided, yet this is exactly what God uses stillness for. He brings your inner world to the surface so that healing can begin. He quiets your environment to teach you to discern his whisper in the noise of your own thoughts. Judith Beck often teaches that awareness is the foundation of change. Spiritually, the same principle applies. Stillness brings awareness of patterns, wounds, fears, and attachments that keep you from moving freely. It exposes where your faith has become dependent on outcomes. It reveals the places where anxiety has disguised itself as ambition. And once you see these clearly, the Spirit can begin to reorder them. The silence that once terrified you becomes a mirror for transformation. The space that once felt empty becomes filled with meaning. The Stoics understood the power of stillness as an anchor for wisdom. Marcus Aurelius wrote that tranquility comes not from external peace, but from internal order. God calls you into that same kind of calm. He doesn't remove chaos, he changes your posture within it. Stillness isn't escape, it's engagement at a deeper level. It's choosing to remain centered while everything around you spins. It's learning to trust the timing of heaven rather than the pressure of your own expectations. When you enter this phase, you might feel like nothing is happening. Your prayers may seem unanswered, your path unclear, your energy low. But in reality, everything essential is happening beneath the surface. Stillness is where spiritual rewiring takes place. It's where you stop reacting and start perceiving. The Holy Spirit begins to reorder your priorities, heal your nervous system, and reset your sense of direction. Andrew Huberman's studies on breath and attention show how slow, deliberate stillness lowers stress hormones and restores clarity. Spiritually, that physiological peace becomes an opening for revelation. The quieter you become, the clearer you hear. At first, this process will feel like withdrawal. You'll want to fill the silence with noise, seek constant stimulation, or find distraction in busyness. But every time you resist the urge to rush, you strengthen your spiritual muscle of patience. Every time you sit quietly and breathe through the discomfort, your capacity for divine awareness grows. God's timing begins to feel less like delay and more like design. You realize that stillness isn't about waiting for him to act. It's about recognizing that he's been acting all along. Philosophically, Descartes' pursuit of certainty began with doubt and solitude. He withdrew from the noise of society to find truth through thought. God does something similar in your spirit. He removes external validation so you can rediscover internal conviction. In stillness, your identity stops depending on activity. You stop confusing busyness with purpose and start understanding that true direction emerges only from quiet conviction. The more silent your surroundings, the more fluent you become in the language of peace. You'll know this stage has begun when you start craving silence more than stimulation. You'll notice that peace starts to feel more productive than progress. The urge to prove yourself fades. You begin to understand that divine doors don't open through striving, but through surrender. God is not calling you to exhaustion. He's calling you to awareness. In this stillness, your intuition sharpens, your spirit listens, and your steps become guided rather than forced. Stillness is where strength is born. It's where anxiety dissolves and clarity emerges. When you finally stop running, you discover that God was never far ahead. He was always beside you, waiting for you to slow down enough to walk with Him. This is the secret of every divine transition. Stillness precedes revelation. The door you're waiting for will not open because you push harder, but because you become quiet enough to hear the latch click. So if everything in your life has suddenly gone quiet, don't rush to fill the silence. Stay, listen, breathe. Stillness is not the pause before the breakthrough, it is the breakthrough. God is not preparing the path ahead of you, He's preparing you for the path. And when the stillness has done its work, you won't just hear His voice, you'll recognize that His peace has been guiding you all along. The glimpse of the door. There comes a moment, often after a long stretch of silence and surrender, when something shifts, subtly, almost imperceptibly at first. It might be a conversation that feels divinely timed, a sense of peace that doesn't match your situation, a dream that feels too specific to ignore, or a sudden clarity that pierces confusion like light breaking through fog. That is the glimpse of the door. God doesn't reveal the full picture because faith must still lead the way, but He gives you enough of a glimpse to remind you that you haven't been waiting in vain. It's not the destination, but the confirmation. Heaven shows you just enough to keep your spirit in motion. Spiritually, these glimpses serve as divine markers. They are checkpoints between revelation and manifestation. God uses them to strengthen trust, not satisfy curiosity. You'll notice they rarely come in grand displays. Instead, they arrive in subtle alignments. The scripture that speaks directly to your situation, the opportunity that reappears after you thought it was lost, the inner nudge that feels too alive to dismiss. Each of these moments whispers the same truth. Keep walking, you're closer than you think. What you see now is not random, it's rehearsal for what's about to unfold. Neuroscience helps us understand why this stage feels both thrilling and disorienting. The brain releases dopamine in response to anticipation. The glimpse creates expectancy. That surge of motivation is meant to sustain momentum, but if misinterpreted, it can lead to impatience. God allows these glimpses to awaken hope, not to make you chase outcomes. They are designed to train your focus, to remind you that progress is happening even when full manifestation isn't yet visible. The challenge is to enjoy the glimpse without idolizing it. Faith matures when you can see a piece of the promise and still trust the unseen whole. Judith Beck teaches that change becomes permanent when the mind learns to interpret new evidence differently. Spiritually, the same happens here. The glimpse is not proof that you've arrived, but that your perception has evolved. You begin to see life through the lens of alignment instead of anxiety. You start connecting the dots, realizing that what once felt like random suffering was actually strategic preparation. God never wastes pain. He transforms it into pattern. Each small sign you perceive is a fragment of the masterpiece He's been painting in secret. The glimpse of the door is meant to activate gratitude, not entitlement. It reminds you that the process had a purpose. The silence you endured wasn't emptiness, it was echo. Every unanswered prayer now begins to make sense in hindsight. You see why certain doors closed, why people left, why timing had to delay. This moment of recognition becomes a sacred revelation. God was never withholding. He was weaving. The glimpse is your first look at what He's been building while you waited. Philosophically, Descartes would call this the birth of clarity after doubt. In the space between uncertainty and revelation, understanding finally begins to emerge. Spiritually, that clarity isn't just intellectual, it's emotional. Peace returns, but it feels different now. It's quieter, deeper, unshakable. You no longer need proof that God is working. You sense it. You can stand in the middle of transition and feel as though you've already arrived. That's how you know you've glimpsed the door. Your peace no longer depends on circumstances, but on conviction. Yet this stage also tests humility. The glimpse can make you eager to move prematurely. You may want to rush ahead, to force open what was meant to unfold naturally. But just because you can see the door doesn't mean it's time to enter. Every open door still has divine timing. God often lets you glimpse what's coming so you can grow into the version of yourself that can handle it. The promise might already exist, but the preparation isn't complete. This is the moment to steady your heart, to replace excitement with expectancy, impulse with discipline. Andrew Huberman's research shows how anticipation shapes attention. What you focus on grows in neural importance. Spiritually, this means that your focus determines your experience of faith. If you fixate on the outcome, anxiety grows. If you focus on the source, peace expands. The glimpse trains you to keep your eyes on alignment rather than arrival. God gives you the vision so you can prepare your vessel, not so you can sprint toward the finish. When the glimpse arrives, it will feel sacred yet fragile, like light reflected on water. You can't grab it, only receive it. It's heaven's way of saying, "You were right to trust me." It's not a finish line, it's a love note. Every glimpse reminds you that faith is not waiting for something to happen, it's realizing it already is. What you sense now in spirit will soon become visible in life. So if you've begun to see hints of change, confirmations, alignments, small openings, don't question them. Honor them. Breathe gratitude into them. The glimpse of the door isn't meant to make you impatient. It's meant to make you ready. It's heaven showing you a reflection of what's already been decided in eternity. The waiting is almost over, but the transformation must finish its work. The door you see isn't a promise far away. It's an echo of one that's already unlocking. The threshold of light. There comes a sacred moment when everything that once felt disconnected, the silence, the waiting, the losses, the restlessness, begins to make sense. You look back and realize that every detour, every heartbreak, every unanswered prayer was not a delay, but design. You have been led here to the threshold of light. This is where revelation meets realization. It doesn't arrive with fanfare or noise. It arrives quietly, like dawn breaking after a long night. You begin to see that God was never building the door for you. He was building you for the door. Everything you endured has shaped the strength to walk through it without fear. Spiritually, this threshold represents the convergence of faith and fulfillment. The door stands before you not as an escape, but as an entrance into purpose, clarity, and peace. You no longer need to force what's next, because what's next recognizes you. This is not the end of your waiting. It's the birth of your readiness. The door opens not because you begged for it, but because you've become the person it was designed for. Heaven doesn't waste effort. It waits for alignment. Once your heart, mind, and actions synchronize with divine rhythm, the threshold illuminates itself. Philosophically, Descartes described illumination as the moment when the mind perceives truth not through reasoning, but recognition. Spiritually, this illumination is revelation through remembrance. You suddenly remember who you've always been in God's design. The doubts that haunted you dissolve, not because you finally have control, but because you no longer need it. Peace has replaced panic, surrender has replaced striving, and awareness has replaced anxiety. You realize that divine timing was never about waiting for God to act. It was about becoming still enough to recognize that He never stopped. Neuroscience describes moments like this as integration. The brain stops fighting itself. The emotional, logical, and spiritual centers begin to operate in unity. That harmony feels like peace. The same applies spiritually. When faith and understanding meet, the chaos within you quiets. This is what the threshold of light feels like, a deep inner knowing that you are exactly where you're supposed to be. No forcing, no rushing, no explaining. Just presence. The tension that once tore you apart now serves as proof that something greater has taken form inside you. Judith Beck's cognitive frameworks teach that real transformation becomes visible only when new thoughts produce new behaviors. Spiritually, you're now living that truth. You no longer react from fear. You respond from faith. You no longer chase signs. You carry them. You no longer wait for permission. You walk in purpose. You've moved from information to embodiment, from believing in God's promises to becoming one. That is what crossing the threshold means. Not just seeing the light, but realizing you are part of it. At this stage, gratitude overflows. You stop mourning what was lost because you now understand it was pruning for clarity. The people who left, the opportunities that slipped away, the long nights of uncertainty, they were all part of the refining. Nothing was wasted. Every tear watered something that is now blooming. You recognize that the purpose of pain was never punishment, but preparation. Every moment you wanted to quit was actually heaven strengthening your spirit for the weight of what's coming. And now, standing here, the peace you carry is the reward of every unseen battle. This threshold is not about arrival. It's about awakening. The light doesn't just shine before you, it shines within you. You begin to notice that the same voice that once whispered direction now speaks through your actions. You've become the vessel of everything you prayed for. God didn't just open a door in your life, He turned you into one. You are now the access point for healing, for wisdom, for peace in the lives around you. This is the true meaning of divine alignment, when His purpose moves through you, not just for you. And as you take that first step through the door, you'll notice something profound. The fear that once guarded the unknown is gone. The darkness that once surrounded your path no longer feels threatening. The light isn't something you walk into, it's something that walks with you. Every breath becomes sacred, every step becomes guided, every moment becomes meaningful. You're no longer asking, when will God move? Because you now understand He already has. The movement was never external, it was internal. You are the evidence of answered prayer. So as you stand on the threshold of light, take a moment to breathe it in. You've been prepared for this. The silence, the separation, the surrender, all of it has led you here, and now, as this new door opens, step through it not with fear, but with reverence. Because what awaits you on the other side is not a new life to chase, but a deeper life to embody. You're not entering a destination, you're becoming one. The journey doesn't end here. It transforms. What once felt like darkness was always light disguised as discipline. You've crossed from striving to surrender, from waiting to walking, from seeking to becoming. And as you move forward, carry this truth with you. God never opens a door to change your surroundings. He opens it to change you, until your very presence becomes a doorway for others to encounter His light.